In the scorched heart of 1889 Arizona, Isaiah Boone, a quiet rancher with a father's legacy and one stubborn spring, faces a slick banker who claims to own his water. No hearing, no warning, just forged papers and a sheriff with a pocket full of bribes. But when a brave orphan shows Isaiah a hidden ditch, the fight begins. With a weather-cracked survey, an old land ledger, and a buried pipe stamped Boone and Son, Isaiah stands tall. Can truth hold steady when the law bends for power? That spring isn't just water, it's justice waiting to flow. By midsummer of 1889, the Arizona sun had baked Silver Hollow clean through. Horses panted near empty troughs, garden rows wilted before they could bloom, and even the preacher had stopped praying for rain out loud, though folks figured he still whispered it in his sleep. At the edge of that dusty town, Isaiah Boone tended the last green patch for miles. He moved slow that morning, his boots crunching dry soil, as he checked the cedar post fencing near Boone Spring, a patch of shade and water his father had guarded like gospel. The spring ran shallow now, but it still ran, enough for 24 head and a man's pride. Isaiah bent and touched the damp earth. "You hang on now," he murmured. "I'll do the same." He stood tall as he could, and scanned the hills. Nothing moved but the haze rising like breath off a skillet. Back at the main road, a cloud of dust trailed behind a gleaming coach, polished brass-carved paneling, and horses groomed like show ponies. It came to a halt right in front of the courthouse. Out stepped Virgil Crane, all silk cravat and smug grin, wiping sweat with a monogrammed handkerchief. A banker by title, but everyone in 3 counties knew he was a land shark wrapped in velvet. Crane tipped his hat to the Sheriff Reed Duncan, who stood waiting with a half smile and a full belly. Isaiah, who had paused by the blacksmith to water his mule, saw it plain as day. The envelope Crane handed over, folded thick and quiet. "Pleasure doing business as always," Crane said loud enough for anyone within earshot. The sheriff nodded. "You said you'd found some old papers." Crane tapped the briefcase in his hand. "Rediscovered sheriff. 1870, water lien. Seems to say Boone Spring was misfiled. Belongs to the bank now, technically." Isaiah didn't move, just clenched his jaw. Later that day, he rode out past his northern fence line and found a wooden stake freshly driven near the spring. It bore a red flag and a nailed notice typed official-looking and signed Notice of Water Repossession, per Territorial Claim 71B. It might as well have said, "You lose." He didn't shout, didn't curse, just removed his hat and wiped the sweat from his brow. "You're lying," a voice said from behind. It was young Toby Carter, maybe 12 years old, wiry as a fence rail and twice as tough. Orphan mostly left alone since his mother passed last year. He'd taken to trailing Isaiah now and then, sometimes offering to help with chores, sometimes just hungry for someone to talk to. "You're not going to let him take your spring, are you?" Toby asked, hands on his hips like he meant to fight Crane himself. Isaiah didn't answer. He stared down at the flagged post, then back at the horizon. "I got more questions than answers, son," he said finally, "but I aim to ask them in the right places." "Then you better ask." "Fast," Toby replied. "He's already told folks it's his now." Isaiah looked at the boy. "You know where he gets his water from?" Toby nodded. "Saw a ditch running through mesquite back of Crane's land. Wasn't there before last month." Isaiah gave a single nod. "Show me." By nightfall, they were crouched in scrub brush, watching water trickle down a freshly dug channel, curving right off Boone Spring and feeding Crane's showcase pasture a mile off. Isaiah stared long and hard at the glimmering theft. He stood, dusted his jeans, and said softly, "Then it ain't just a paper lie, it's a stolen stream." Back at the cabin, he lit a lantern and opened the cedar chest his father left behind. In it, a cracked leather Bible, a rusted branding iron, and tucked deep in the spine of an old ledger, a brittle sheet of parchment. Isaiah unfolded it, fingers trembling. A survey map, no seal but clearly drawn, and there marked in faded ink, Boone Spring, right in the center. Isaiah Boone didn't sleep that night, not truly. The desert wind rattled the shutters, and somewhere in the dark, a coyote yipped once then was silent. Isaiah sat at the kitchen table, lamp burning low, the old parchment survey open before him, like a warning whispered across generations. It showed the spring in black ink labeled simply, Boone Parcel B Water Source Present. No seal, no signature, but the paper felt honest, like his father's hand had touched it last. By sunrise, Isaiah had packed his saddlebag with biscuits, jerky, a coil of rope, and the parchment wrapped inside a cloth scrap. He cinched the saddle tight and glanced back at the house. Toby was there on the porch, eyes squinting under a too-big hat. "You riding out?" Isaiah gave a small nod. "Territorial office in Copper Falls. 30 miles. Might find what Crane's paper forgets to say. Want company?" Isaiah shook his head. "I need you to stay. Watch the spring. Watch the ditch." Toby nodded solemn. "If they come back, I'll count the shovels." Isaiah almost smiled. The road to Copper Falls cut through sandstone ridges and mesquite flats. Dust kicked up in clouds behind the mare's hooves, and the cum scorched his neck, no matter how low he pulled the brim of his hat. He arrived mid-afternoon wind-chapped and quiet, and tied off near the clerk's office, a squat sod-roofed building shaded by cottonwood trees. Inside, the air smelled of ink and dust. A silver-haired woman looked up from behind a cluttered desk. "Territorial records," she said, voice soft but steady. "Name's Delora Finch. What brings you to my books?" Mr. Isaiah removed his hat and stepped forward, looking for a filing. 1866, or near it. Water rights for Josiah Boone. Delora raised a brow. "Josiah? I knew that man. Came through with a signed survey parcel. B. Kind eyes. Spoke little like you." She stood and walked to the back shelves, fingers trailing worn spines. "We used to write in ledgers then. Nothing fancy. Let's see." She pulled down a heavy book with cracked leather binding, opened it to a marked page, and ran her finger down the lines. There she said, "Line 112, Boone Josiah. Perpetual water right parcel B, spring at coordinates 3114. Recorded under the 1866 Mining Act. Witnessed, filed, noted in ink." Isaiah exhaled, slow, steady. "Can I get a copy?" Delora nodded. "Certified and sealed. I'll swear affidavit too, if you like." "I would." She paused, then added, "I remember when he filed. Said he didn't trust banks. Said the land knew him. Reckon it still does." They shared a quiet moment. Outside, a breeze rustled the cottonwoods like water over stone. By sundown, they were riding back together. Delora insisted. No sense leaving a man alone to fight men like Crane and Isaiah didn't argue. They rode double time, the mare steady and sure. In Delora's satchel, 2 certified copies of the 1806 filing, her notarized affidavit, and the original ledger line copied in careful hand. They reached Silver Hollow by noon the next day. The courthouse looked smaller than Isaiah remembered, but maybe it was just that the truth he carried now felt too big to hide. Deputy Clerk Sandoval met them at the door. "Problem?" he asked, looking between the travel-worn cowboy and the older woman beside him. Isaiah unrolled the parchment and laid it flat on the clerk's table. Delora followed with the affidavit and certified pages. "This land," Isaiah said, pointing to the line, "this water, it was never up for sale," Sandoval read. His eyes widened. "Stamped a witness archived," Delora added. "You log that right. Time-stamped. Publicly." A pair of townsfolk lounging outside the window heard it all. One even stepped in to witness the log. By the time they left the courthouse, Isaiah's claim wasn't just a piece of paper. It was on record, legal, real, and Crane, wherever he was, would soon know it. The first thing Isaiah noticed when he returned home was the silence. Not the good kind, no wind in the cottonwoods, no lowing from the cattle pen, just stillness and the faint smell of smoke. He broke into a run before he even reached the porch. The hay barn, or what was left of it, stood blackened and hollow. Charred beams curled like broken ribs, and a patch of scorched earth still smoldered in the corner nearest the spring ditch. Isaiah dropped to his knees beside the stone trough, now cracked from heat. One of the water barrels had burst. The other sat empty, ringed with ash. Toby came tearing around the side, soot on his cheeks, and one sleeve singed near the cuff. "I tried Mr. Boone," he panted. "They came just after dark. 2 men, faces covered. I saw them light the straw and run. I tried to stop it. Threw what water I had. Isaiah put a steady hand on his shoulder. "You did what you could, son." "I should have done more," Toby muttered, fists clenched. "You stayed. That's more than most." Isaiah rose slowly, eyes on the ruined barn. "Did you recognize their voices?" "One had a limp." "I remember the way he dragged his boot in the gravel." Isaiah nodded. "Then we can find him." Just then a rider approached from the west. Marshal Silas Whitcomb, gray-bearded and broad-shouldered, dismounted and surveyed the scene. "Heard there was trouble," he said simply. Isaiah motioned to the wreckage. Trouble found us. The marshal crouched beside a boot print near the ashes. Saw similar tracks near the saloon last week. Belonged to a man Crane hired for security. Name's Rusk. Mean streak, bad knees. Toby perked up. That's him. He limped. The marshal stood. That's enough for me. I'll have him and whoever else was here in a cell by sundown. He paused, then added, I'll need witness statements. From both of you. Isaiah looked at Toby. The boy nodded, jaw tight. By evening, Rusk and another man were behind bars. Their story cracked fast. They named Crane as the one who paid them cash up front to spook the old man and burn a few bales. Isaiah gave his statement in the courthouse calm and clear. When he handed over the Copper Falls survey and Delora's affidavit, the deputy clerk stamped them with the courthouse's seal and made a copy for the territorial file. That night, the townsfolk surprised him. Not many, just 5 at first, but each one carried something. A hammer, a water jug, a bag of nails. You ain't the only one Crane's tried to bleed dry, said old Mr. Hargrove, who owned the dry goods store. Guess we all kept quiet too long. By moonrise, 8 men and 2 wagons had gathered. They cleared the charred beams and laid new footings. Delora brought fresh bread. One neighbor hauled over fence planks. Isaiah worked silently alongside them, sleeves rolled high, sweat streaking the soot on his face. Toby stayed close, hammering with determination that far outweighed his size. Nobody said much, but in the space between strikes, trust began to grow like a sprout in dry soil. As the sun peeked over the eastern ridge, they had a new frame standing tall. Not finished, not fancy, but solid. Isaiah wiped his brow and looked at them all. Thank you. Mr. Hargrove shrugged. You earned it. That spring feeds more than your cattle now. Isaiah stepped toward the trough and ran his hand through the trickling water that still flowed slower now, but steady. A spring that hadn't stopped even when fire came close. He looked to the group. Come morning, I file for full damages, and I want that ditch closed, properly. We'll dig it together if need be. Toby grinned. I'll bring the shovel. Isaiah's smile was faint, but real. Judge Horace Klein didn't like messes, and Silver Hollow had become one. The morning after the fire and rebuild, he sent a hand-delivered notice summoning both Isaiah Boone and Virgil Crane to an emergency hearing. The town's only courtroom inside the weather-worn government hall smelled of oiled wood and old paper. Folks packed the pews anyway, whispering behind fans and handkerchiefs, curiosity piqued by the fire and rumors of forged deeds. Crane arrived first, buttoned up in a pale linen suit, holding a rolled scroll like a preacher with a holy text. His eyes scanned the crowd, landing briefly on the judge's gavel. Then he smirked and took a seat beside his lawyer, a sharp-eyed man from Tucson named Marston Bell. Isaiah entered next, boots, dusty hat in hand, a canvas satchel slung over one shoulder. He gave a nod to the judge and another to Marshal Whitcomb, who stood near the back with arms crossed. Toby followed close behind, clutching a folded page with his own statement. Judge Klein rapped the bench. Territorial hearing on Claim 71B water rights in dispute between Mr. Virgil Crane and Mr. Isaiah Boone. Both parties present. Marston Bell rose. Representing Mr. Crane, Your Honor, we submit Exhibit A notarized deed from 1870 signed by the former territorial clerk granting control of Boone Spring to First Territorial Bank, whose assets Mr. Crane now owns. He walked the scroll to the bench and unrolled it. Klein squinted. Seal's faint, the judge muttered, and the clerk in question, he's dead correct, passed away last fall. Bell nodded. But the records remain. Do they? Klein asked, tone sharp. Isaiah stood calm and measured. Your Honor, I submit. Exhibits B through D. A certified copy of the original Boone filing from Copper Falls. A notarized affidavit from Mrs. Delora Finch, clerk from that very office. And statements from Marshal Whitcomb and Deputy Clerk Sandoval confirming fire damage and attempted intimidation tied to Mr. Crane's associates. He walked them forward, placing each item with care. Klein picked up Delora's affidavit first. His brow rose. Mrs. Finch rode 30 miles to verify this. She did? Isaiah said. I'd take her word over a ghost's seal, the judge said quietly. Crane shifted in his seat, jaw tight. Klein opened the map and traced the ink line toward the spring. Then he turned to the supposed deed and lifted it closer to the sunlight filtering through the window. Odd, he muttered. This seal's etched, not pressed. Ink smears under the edge. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a magnifier. And this signature matches nothing in the official books. Marston Bell stiffened. Are you alleging fraud, I'm saying? We'll find out, Klein replied coolly. I hereby impound Exhibit A for independent handwriting analysis. Until the seal's verified and property surveys inspected, no water shall be diverted from Boone Spring. Gasps fluttered through the room, like sparrows startled from a bush. Additionally, Klein continued, I'll appoint Commissioner Rafael Alvarez to inspect the disputed parcels. He'll file a neutral report with this court by week's end. Crane slammed his palm on the table. This is absurd. Klein stared him down. What's absurd, Mr. Crane, is that men who torch barns think they can lecture this bench. Consider this your formal warning. Disrupt this court again, and I'll hold you in contempt. Silence followed heavy as stone. Isaiah tipped his hat politely. Thank you, Judge. The hearing ended. Crane stormed out Bell on his heels. Isaiah lingered in the hallway, while townsfolk filtered past, some nodding, quietly others looking ashamed. They hadn't stood sooner. Toby tugged Isaiah's sleeve. You think the judge believes you? Isaiah looked down, eyes thoughtful. He believes the law. And now so do more folks than yesterday. Behind them, the clerk's bell rang again. Klein's voice echoed through the hallway. Boone, don't ride far. I've got a feeling this story's not done yet. Isaiah turned without flinching. Neither am I, Judge. The next morning broke cool and gray with clouds hinting at rain that wouldn't come. Isaiah stood by the spring with a tin mug of coffee, watching the water trickle into the trough. It was clear, pure, the kind of water folks would fight for or lie to own. Boone, a voice called down the trail. Commissioner Rafael Alvarez rode in with 2 pack mules, his brown coat coated in trail dust and a canvas map roll bouncing at his side. He dismounted with a grunt and tipped his hat. Morning. I hope you didn't expect a young buck. Isaiah offered a slow smile. Didn't expect anything but fair eyes and a steady hand. That Alvarez said I can manage. They shook hands. Alvarez got right to work, setting up a tripod scope and stringing taut wire from stake to stake. Every few minutes he paused to scribble in his leather-bound field book, measuring gradients and reading soil compression near the spring head. You see this ridge, he asked, pointing to a rise near the barn. That's where the original runoff line sat, must have shifted some with time. But erosion don't lie. Your spring's been feeding west since at least your daddy's day. Isaiah watched him drag a rod through the soil, where the ditch diverted now, dry. Crane's trench cuts. Upslope, Alvarez said, squatting. That ain't natural. You need tools to carve water that way. They worked side by side all morning until Toby came running from the orchard. Mr. Boone. Over here. The boy waved them down past the far fence line to a rocky patch behind a line of prickly pear. There, half buried in the loam, something metallic glinted. Isaiah crouched. Pipe looks like it. Alvarez brushed back dirt, revealing a flange marked with a maker's stamp. Boone and Son, 1869. Alvarez let out a low whistle. This ain't just proof it's history. Territorial filings list your father's workshop as a registered supplier. This pipe predates Crane's deed by near 20 years. They followed the old channel line back to where the ditch had been severed and redirected. Alvarez made detailed sketches marking distances and soil layers. He even took charcoal rubbings of the pipe stamp. That trench Crane dug, Alvarez muttered, trespasses your boundary by 154 feet. I'll have the number certified by dawn. Isaiah stood quiet for a moment. Then this land remembers better than men do. That afternoon they returned to town. Alvarez submitted a preliminary report to Judge Klein, sealing it in an envelope and logging the survey in the territorial docket. The clerk signed it with wide eyes. Should I notify the marshal? The clerk asked, voice low. Not yet, Isaiah said. Let the truth finish the walk. Then the law can run. Outside, Toby tugged Isaiah's sleeve. We really found it. You did? Isaiah said, laying a hand on the boy's shoulder. You stayed curious. That's how men win quiet wars. That evening, Isaiah sat beneath the oak near his barn. The frame still smelled of fresh-cut pine. Around him, frogs began to chirp, and stars blinked over the ridge. Crane hadn't shown his face all day. Rumor said he was holed up in his office pacing with a bottle in hand. No more threats, no more hired men lurking in the mesquite, just silence and the waiting storm. Toby came out with a blanket and handed Isaiah a biscuit. Town feels different, the boy said. "It is," Isaiah answered. "Truth has weight. When you lift it high enough, folks see what's really buried." He glanced up at the full moon cresting the hill. "And tomorrow," he added, "we'll see who can carry it." By sunrise, the town of Silver Hollow was already holding its breath. Judge Klein had scheduled the second hearing for high noon, and the courthouse, normally dusty and half-empty, buzzed like a kicked beehive. Folks who once kept quiet now filled the gallery, some standing shoulder to shoulder, just to hear what might come. The townsfolk weren't just watching a land dispute anymore, they were watching a reckoning. Isaiah Boone walked through the doors, calm as ever, a folder tucked under one arm. His clothes were clean but plain, his boots dusted from the ride in. Beside him, Toby clutched a rolled sketch Alvarez had made, still careful not to smudge the commissioner's penciled notes. The judge sat high on the bench, Wilb's loose spectacles low and eyes sharp. "Court is now in session," Klein declared. "Territorial Claim 71B. Mr. Crane, I trust you're ready." "Virgil." Crane stepped forward, smug but stiff, trailed by Marston Bell, his attorney. Crane slapped a new document onto the clerk's desk. "Your Honor, we submit a revised deed," Bell announced. "Discovered only yesterday among bank archives bearing a clearer seal from 1870. It affirms Mr. Crane's rights to the Boone Spring." Klein's brow furrowed. "Is that so? Let me see it." He examined the paper, then glanced up slowly. Curious. The same clerk, the same signature, but this one is dated 6 weeks after the ledger entry we received from Copper Falls. And that seal, he held it up for the gallery, still lacks pressure marks from a proper stamp. Inked, not embossed. Bell's voice tightened. "Respectfully, Your Honor, perhaps the clerk changed procedures, or perhaps someone changed the clerk." Klein cut in voice iron. "Mr. Alvarez, please present your findings." Alvarez, seated among the crowd, rose and approached the bench, handing over his official report. He spoke with the precision of a man used to facts, not speculation. "My survey confirms Boone Spring lies fully within the original Boone parcel. Mr. Crane's trench runs 154 feet over that boundary. Furthermore, we recovered an 1869 pipe flange, half buried near the spring, stamped Boone and Son. A metallurgist will confirm its age, but the design matches territorial construction standards from that era." A quiet wave rippled through the room. No gasps, just the intake of realization. Alvarez continued. "I've also included soil stratigraphy, confirming Crane's ditch was dug in the past 3 months. The water flow was deliberately diverted." Crane's face flushed red. "This is absurd." "Absurd," Klein echoed, "is presenting 3 different versions of the same deed and expecting the law to blink." Toby stood suddenly clutching his rolled sketch. "Your Honor, I was the one who found the pipe. I know I'm just a kid, but Mr. Boone didn't take anything. He was just trying to stop them from stealing." Klein looked at the boy, then at the rows of townsfolk behind him. "Thank you, son," he said gently. "Bravery doesn't care how old you are." He turned back to the bench. "Mr. Boone, you've submitted historic documentation, an independent survey, eyewitness testimony, and tangible artifacts. Mr. Crane, you've submitted conflicting papers and a questionable seal. I find the lien invalid, the diversion unlawful, and the claim dismissed." The gavel came down like thunder. "Furthermore, damages for trespass and attempted fraud will be calculated in the next hearing. I am referring the forged deed to the Territorial Marshal's office for investigation." Before Crane could react, Marshal Whitcomb stepped forward with 2 deputies. "Mr. Crane," the marshal said quietly, "you'll need to come with us." There was no fight left in Crane. Just silence and the click of iron as the shackles closed around his wrists. Isaiah didn't smile. He simply tipped his hat to the judge, the marshal, and the boy who hadn't let fear keep him silent. Toby looked up at him, eyes wide. "Did we win?" Isaiah knelt. "We didn't win, son. We proved we never lost." The next morning, Silver Hollow felt different. A hush had settled, not the wary kind, but one laced with a strange kind of hope, like the first calm after a long dust storm. At sunrise, Isaiah Boone stepped out of his cabin and stood at the edge of his spring. The water flowed steady, the trough full, the soil dark and damp around the edges. For the first time in weeks, the creek bed downstream shimmered with promise. He heard the faint clatter of hooves. Down the hill came a wagon, then another. Within the hour, 6 rolled in, followed by townsfolk on horseback, others on foot, some carrying lumber and nails, others with baskets of food, water skins, rope, and grit. Isaiah turned slowly, as Sheriff Duncan, now suspended and stripped of badge, rode up, with his head lowered, hat in hand. Boone Duncan muttered, voice rough, "I came to say I was wrong. I let money steer my duty. Folks are right to doubt me now." Isaiah looked him over, said nothing. The sheriff swallowed. "I won't ask for your trust. Just wanted to help carry lumber today if you'll have it." Isaiah nodded once. "Then take that post yonder." Behind him, Toby beamed. "We're really building it back." Isaiah put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "No, son, we're building it forward." The barn had been nothing but charred beams and scorched dirt, but now hands moved in rhythm, hammer to nail beam, to brace one board at a time. It wasn't fast work, but it was honest, and it was theirs. By noon, the scent of pine and sawdust filled the air. Mrs. Finch, the old Copper Falls clerk, stood on the porch with a ladle handing out cool well water to each man and woman. "Tastes better when earned," she quipped, and no one disagreed. Across the clearing, Alvarez unfolded his survey again, pointing out future trench reinforcements for irrigation. "If you keep a crew on this line," he told Isaiah, "you could have a co-op flow system. Each neighbor drawing what they need, nothing wasted." Isaiah nodded. No more backdoor deals. Water should travel like truth, clear and shared. Even folks who hadn't lifted a finger during the trial showed up now. Mr. Whitlow from the feed store, Miss Annie from the telegraph office, and the Murphys, who once scoffed when Isaiah walked into church. But today they all stood beside him. By late afternoon, the barn was framed and half-roofed. Toby climbed up the rafter and hammered proudly beside two ranchers twice his size. Dust clung to his shirt, sweat streaked his brow, but his grin didn't quit. Down below, the marshal returned from town. "Crane's bound for Tucson," he said quietly to Isaiah. "Charges filed. Should hold in territorial court. They'll send word once the ink dries." Isaiah only nodded. "And the sheriff," the marshal added. "He's hammering nails," Isaiah said. "Let the town judge him by what he builds, not just what he broke." A quiet chuckle passed between them. At dusk, someone lit a lantern and someone else brought out a fiddle. Before long, boots scuffed in the dirt and laughter replaced suspicion. Children darted between sawhorses. Coffee pots steamed over coals. And Isaiah, never one for words, watched it all with quiet, tired eyes. Toby sat beside him, with a biscuit in one hand, the other stained from pencil lead. "I made something," the boy said. He held up a cedar plank smoothed and painted with simple letters. "Boone Spring Hope shared freely." Isaiah took it gently, thumb brushing over the edges. "Think it's too much?" Toby asked. Isaiah looked out across the flickering light, where strangers had become neighbors again. "No," he said, voice soft as wind through cottonwood. "I think it's just right." The next morning, the sun broke through the haze like a judgment passed. By 9, the courthouse steps were lined with townsfolk, some with folded arms, others with folded documents. Even Miss Annie, who rarely left the telegraph office, had closed early just to stand near the door. Inside, the air hung thick with dust and expectation. Judge Horace Klein adjusted his spectacles and called the room to order. His gray beard twitched as he scanned the docket, then looked over the rim of his glasses at the two men standing before him, Isaiah Boone and Virgil Crane. Crane wore his usual polished suit, pressed boots shined tie-tight, but something about him twitched today, the corner of his mouth, the way his fingers wouldn't stay still. Isaiah, by contrast, stood calm in a worn shirt and clean suspenders, hands clasped behind his back, like he was listening to a slow rain. "Mr. Boone," the judge began, "you claim Crane falsified a lien and diverted water unlawfully." Isaiah nodded once. "That's right, sir, and I've brought the proof." He stepped forward with the Copper Falls land ledger, the signed affidavit from Delora Finch, and the survey map drawn by Commissioner Alvarez. Each was passed to the clerk, who handed them to the judge. Judge Klein's eyes narrowed as he turned the pages. "Filed in 6, Boone Spring Parcel B, water rights held under the Mining Act, confirmed." He flipped to the affidavit. Clerk Finch, well known. No reason to doubt her signature. He looked up. "And Commissioner Alvarez report." Alvarez stood from the gallery. "Verified yesterday. Crane's ditch cuts Boone property by 154 feet. I found a pipe buried behind Crane's home. Original flange reads Boone and Son 1869. Gasps rippled through the room. Crane shifted. The judge motioned. "Mr. Crane, your response?" Crane stepped forward, unfurling a document with dramatic flair. "Your Honor, I present an 1870 lien recovered from estate records." signed by then-clerk Harlan Poe, witnessed by Mayor Greeley himself. The judge took it, held it up to the light. "This seal is faded." Alvarez cleared his throat. "That's because it's counterfeit." Crane turned sharp. "You calling me a liar?" "I'm calling your paper a forgery," Alvarez replied. Poe never signed documents in red ink, and Greeley died in 1869. The signatures dated 1870. Crane's mouth opened, then closed. Judge Klein set the document aside. "Mr. Crane, you have presented false evidence in a court of law. In addition, 2 men arrested for arson have named you their employer in sworn statements." "I was framed," Crane snapped. "They're cowhands," who confessed, the judge said in front of a marshal. The marshal stepped forward from the back of the room, iron cuffs in hand. Judge Klein's voice was steady now, a hammer ready to fall. "Virgil Crane, I hereby void your lien order full restitution to Isaiah Boone for property damage and find you in contempt for presenting falsified documents. You are under arrest pending trial." The crowd erupted in murmurs. The marshal clasped the cuffs on Crane's wrists tight and final. "Get your hands off me!" Crane barked, writhing. Isaiah didn't move. He just looked at Crane the way a man might look at a thistle in the path not worth stepping on twice. Justice, the judge added, comes slow sometimes, but it comes. As Crane was led down the steps, folks parted without speaking. For all his noise, Crane looked suddenly small. Sheriff Duncan, now stripped of badge but still standing in the doorway, watched it all unfold. He didn't speak either. Outside, Toby stood near the courthouse hitching post holding the cedar sign again. He looked up at Isaiah as he approached. "You didn't shout, didn't fight, just showed the truth." Isaiah nodded. "Truth's got legs, son. It don't run fast, but it don't fall down." The boy smiled. "Then I'll walk with it." Isaiah took the boy's hand, and together they stepped off the courthouse steps into the light of a town just starting to change. Autumn rolled into Silver Hollow with a hush, the kind that settled deep in the bones. The mesquite leaves browned the air, cooled, and the dust that once clung to every boot heel began to fade into memory. Rain came at last, gentle, insistent, and just enough to coax the earth into giving again. But it wasn't the rain alone that changed the town. At Boone Spring, the sound of water flowing through the new troughs was steady as a hymn. Isaiah Boone stood beside it, sleeves rolled mud streaked to his knees. Toby Carter, cheeks smudged with dust and paint, hammered the final nail into a cedar sign and stepped back to admire his handiwork. The words carved deep and true read Boone Spring, hope shared freely. "Think folks will read it?" Toby asked, brushing sawdust off his shirt. Isaiah glanced at the gathering crowd, ranchers, townsfolk, even Miss Annie from the telegraph station. "They'll read it," he said. "But more than that, they'll feel it." It started small. Sam Wilkes, a rancher with a limp and a stubborn mule, brought 2 buckets and waited by the trough. Isaiah gave a nod. Sam filled one, then another, tipped his hat, and left a coiled rope by the fence in return. No words exchanged, just quiet understanding. The next morning, 4 others came. Then 10. By the week's end, a co-op had formed. Every man who took water helped haul gravel or patch the banks. The same hands that once doubted Isaiah now built fences alongside him, poured stone with him, and sent food home with Toby at night. And Isaiah, who had never asked for recognition, found himself surrounded by neighbors who finally saw what he'd been trying to protect, not just a spring, but a way of living honest. At Sunday service, Abigail Tiller stood up in front of the congregation, lace gloves folded in her lap. Isaiah Boone didn't just defend his land. He reminded us this town's got roots deeper than greed. I reckon we forgot that. No one argued. Later that day, Judge Klein visited the spring himself. "Town council approved your co-op charter," he told Isaiah, patting the ledger in his satchel. "What you're doing keeping it open, managed by all, it's something we'll talk about in other towns. Maybe even beyond." Isaiah nodded, humbled. "Water belongs to the land. I just helped it flow right." As the judge left, Toby handed Isaiah a folded page, his school essay marked in red pencil. "My teacher says I should write more stories," he said, half proud, half sheepish. "But I told her I only know one worth telling." Isaiah crouched eye to eye with him. "Then tell it right," he said. "Tell it plain. Truth don't need frills." Toby smiled. "I'll tell him you never shouted, just stood still and let the truth speak." That evening, lanterns glowed around the spring. Children played tag near the trough, their laughter mingling with the gurgle of water. Folks shared biscuits, passed cider jugs, and traded stories under the stars. Crane was gone, the sheriff replaced, and Silver Hollow felt less like a frontier outpost and more like a place with a heart again. Isaiah stood apart, arms crossed, loosely watching the glow. He felt no triumph, only peace. The kind that comes not from winning a fight, but from standing steady until wrong gives way to right. He tipped his hat to no one in particular, then whispered, "Let it flow." And it did. Some men guard treasure. Isaiah Boone guarded water, and in doing so, taught a town how to find its soul again. Drop a comment if you've ever seen justice flow slow but sure. And don't forget, subscribe for more true grit and quiet reckonings from the West.